and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed, and we are in, title please, the Phaedo. We are dialectic training in the text. We've been talking a lot about the significance of that. Last time, we practiced applying the dialectic to some of the most meaningful conclusions in the text, and also the most meaningful questions that have come to light. 3 of which fit together into what we are calling super ultra mega question dynamite. So, the whole text seems to be really pointing to the significance of training the dialectic and mastering the dialectic, making it ours. And last time, just as a reminder, let's open up our notes from last time to remind us what we looked at last time. Let's open up this. Here we go. We talked about applying the dialectic to looking at the implications of what follows if Socrates is telling the truth, if he actually does know what philosophy is. So one of the things is that the causes of our problems or our vices are a kind of shadow of our virtues. And thumbs up. And also we remain trapped in 2 different kinds of ways, trapped to our problems. In one kind of way, the more we pursue our physical senses and desires, the more we remain nailed to the body. That keeps us in our problems. And we can see that if we apply our dialectic to that, we will understand specifically for ourselves why that has to be the case. Because if you're not a lover of learning, then you necessarily have to be a lover of the body, the other 2 parts of the soul, lover of honor or lover of riches, philokimos, philokrimatos, one or both of those. And these inevitably lead to conflict and war. And of course, you are not able to reach understanding, that which is universal, that can unite everyone, that's open to everyone, that can lead to truth and understanding, and also can lead to understanding that which can remove our problems. In other words, we are all born into a body with what we need to get problems. We are not born with what we need to solve problems. We need to do some work. In order to do some work, we have to love learning more than pursuing our problems. So we have to remove what is false or study what we're not doing, as we've been talking about in chat today, as well as going through the activity of finding out what is true. Those 2 things, removing what is false and pursuing what is true. But of course, every single human being is born with what is needed to get that which is false. We're all born with what are the conditions for getting problems. Because we're born seeing through our physical senses. We're born into a family where we adopt to survive certain false beliefs about self and reality. Every human being. So every problem shouldn't be an excuse to punish them. That's stupid, and we understand why. Because every human being has a problem. If they didn't, they wouldn't be here. The question is, do we want to do our meaning, do our purpose, pursue the meaning of life? And according to Socrates, that is learning the art of the dialectic. Because that is the thing that can do both, removing what is false and gaining excellence in what is true. This is what Socrates has been laying out. That means every human being, there's some implications that follow from that. First of all, that sounds terrible. Because how many people are talking about the art of the dialectic? I know one in this book. Apart from that, we do this. I don't know.
Flippity jibbity nonsense. Come on, man.
What in the heck are we talking about here?
See? And even in this text, we've only had a translation which has the word dialectic, the key term that unlocks the whole text. We've only had a text that actually translated it accurately enough to discover this in the last 5 years. So what the heck is going on? And Socrates talked about how, well, if you see what happens if you don't do your purpose of all human beings, mastering the art of the dialectic, you don't have what you need to remove what is false and find what is true. The two words, thumbs up, the two words for summarizing that are purification and perfection. But we have what we need to have problems. That sounds terrible. And he talked about 2 levels of problems: nailing your soul to the body by staying at that level of perception through physical senses, staying at that level of vice, desiring things of the physical senses, the vice version of temperance, the vice version of courage, pursuing things even when you're in fear, because you fear losing those things that you desire of your physical senses. These are vice. This is vice. So we can nail our souls to our body, causing us to be a lover of either that part of our soul, the outward moving lover of honor, or lover of desires. So most people seem to be motivated by making the money, want to be rich, or want to be famous, honor, or a combination of both. And there's that third part of the soul to which the virtue of wisdom applies, which becomes a lover of learning. So the virtue of wisdom relates to being a lover of learning. Learning what? Learning how to be rich, how to make bank, learning how to be insta-famous. No, a certain kind of learning that we had to unpack and discover in the text. So we're learning about reading too. Philosophy and reading properly is some sort of game, some sort of puzzle. We have our Sherlock Holmes hat on, but also, as it's the quest to discover the true meaning of life, we have our adventurer hat on, and that's often, I have that as a wizard's hat. Of course, for Gandalf is an adventurer.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
And we have that sound drop. If you have suggestions for more sound drops, please put them in the chat or in Discord. I have this one I like.
I don't want to eat a monkey.
Joe Rogan says he doesn't want to eat a monkey, which is this, which symbolizes this idea of not pursuing your vices or your physical desires to eat, drink, or have sex with things as your primary motivation. Instead, desire this, the true love of learning, that which we had to unpack in the text and see for ourselves, which is to do with trusting the Logos and repeating this. But then from lover of learning, we go into lover of philosophy, or what we can call lover of dianoia, even better. Philosophy, love of wisdom. Wisdom is the virtue applying to the reasoning part of our soul. But all of the virtues can do it. So we can say, well, actually, let's call it love of dianoia. This mastering of the art of the dialectic. So we have what we need to become imprisoned in our body. No, nailed to the body, or chained was the expression. But there's also another level of problems, being imprisoned in the cycles of reincarnations. The way that we live, how we nurture our soul, affects our incarnations. And there's a lot said at the end about the specifics that happen when we die. And very complicated for art, well, maybe not for you, but for me. And so we are seeing that is the final boss of the text. It's the last part of the text that Socrates gives us. And so we need to go back and train up so we can defeat this final boss. Because we approached it the first time in the love of learning. Our first read through, we can see actually corresponds to what Socrates is calling the true love of learning. A kind of trust in the logos. So we got anos in this text with the accurate Greek. So sometimes we take time out to nail down the actual understanding or the actual translation of the Greek words, which is fun to figure out for ourselves. And again, this is new. It's new because we only have had this translation with the Greek for a short amount of time, with the correct words translated and with the Greek underneath, with access to the internet, so we can look for ourselves. We're not being gate kept by people who are experts or people who know ancient Greek. We can all play. So very exciting for us to be born in this part of history and to discover this podcast. Hooray for us. So, our second read through will be doing what comes after true learning. What comes after true learning? True philosophy, or dianoia. So we're going to go back through the text. We'll probably be able to go a bit quicker because we've leveled up. We're level 2 adventurers now. There's our leveling up sound effect. And with this new level of our progression as souls, we can probably skip through a little bit faster, but now we're going to look for wherever we can find the structure of the dialectic and apply that to the text. And that will be a kind of training to take on the final boss quest. To take that practice, which is our what we're supposed to be doing while we're here, training and practicing and nurturing the dialectic, take that practice with us to have a look again at that final description of the true earth to see if anything new comes to light for us. Now, if we have enough people who are following along with the channel, who, after going through that, graduate to the third level, what comes after philosophy? Philophronesis. And that training facilitates that transition from meditation to contemplation, from understanding to knowledge, or the right word is nous, and they are able to directly perceive through the eye of the soul, ousia, that nature of the true earth. Then, if there's enough people in the community who have had that experience, we would listen to Socrates and go through it a third time to go through that third stage of learning, which he talked about being able to maintain that state of self, integrate it with the logos, but also to recognize what kinds of logos in the text maintains that state of mind. So we'll have a certain state of mind that is connected to nous at some level, maybe in direct experience that's continuous, or just through memory. Both work, because our imagination kind of is our state of mind in a certain kind of way. So if we can keep a memory of that experience, we can go through and see which of these logos arguments in the text maintain that state of mind that we're in. That's the third way of level of reading the text. And Socrates made it that clear. He said, by the way, people who aren't philosophers, who are a lover of contention, or unenlightened was the word he used, people who are unenlightened, and of course we can recognize or understand that this is the phronesis, this is the enlightenment experience, the difference between making it mystical or Eastern, or you have to master a Sufi sutra, or you have to sit on a mat under a waterfall for 40 years. No. It's there's no need to keep it esoteric or only for specific groups of people. We know there's no need to gatekeep what enlightenment is. If it's understood, then it can be understood very simply. Well, it should be. If it's understandable, then we should be able to explain it very simply, which is part of leveling up. As we increase our understanding, we'll be able to see more clearly and obviously. The Master Logos, the sword in the temple, Dianoia. Nice. So, how can we understand enlightenment? Well, the experience would be ousia or nous, the integration of that experience. So it's not just a one-off, it's actually enlightenment, is to be able to maintain and integrate that experience. This is what Socrates makes a key point about in the text. He says, by the way, the regular teachers that Socrates had didn't even get into that first level of learning. Why? Because they weren't learning about the logos. They weren't learning about mind. They were looking at just physical things, and that's not a good explanation for the cause of things. And we know that. I'm not sitting here because I have bones. My next door neighbor has bones, and he ain't doing a podcast like this. There is something in my mind that has decided it is good to do so. And his idea of the good is different. So something to do with our mind is a cause to make our decisions, also what we think is good. All of these causes we forget about or ignore.
What? Come on, man.
And Socrates says this is what drew me into philosophy, the second search for causes, or the right love of learning. And when talking about the right love of learning, Socrates said, hey, by the way, not only do we have to talk about the cause in mind, so now we're in the logos, now we're in true learning, now we're directing our learning to being, now we're in the virtues, now we're doing our job, but we have to look at what maintains the causes. There's something that's created this world based on what it thought was good, but is also maintaining each moment. This is important. You can't ignore what's maintaining. And this is, again, even if you study physics, you can talk about the description of the physical forces seen through the physical senses, that you ignore the fact, well, hang on a second, what's keeping this coffee mug together? What's keeping the physical laws, the various forces or physical causes to do with forces? What's maintaining them each moment? Now, of course, if we want to understand our physical world, that's a question we need to answer. But we're not in philosophy to be good physicists. We want to become better souls or individuals. We want to reach our own enlightenment, our own direct experience of reality. Now, some people come into philosophy because they like the understanding part of it. They like that there is a system that can make rational, understandable reality, self and mind, and understanding itself. That's fantastic because a lot of people grow up in cultures and families where it's all based on stupid beliefs. That's, hey, you either agree with me or you don't. If you don't agree with me, you're my enemy. You believe that the Broncos are the best team. I believe that the Cowboys are the best team. We are enemies. You believe that this religion is right. I believe that this religion is right. We are enemies. And so on. Nonsense. The cause of discord, war, disharmony. And of course, that allegiance to personal beliefs is what people who are scamming and oppressing humanity prey on. They want the money and the power, lover of riches, lovers of fame. And so they say, oh, I like what your religion is. I like your beliefs. Yeah, I'm also racist, or whatever the heck. But a lot of people are drawn to this because they realize that's stupid and irrational. Anyone with a modicum of integrity would realize it's very easy to look at people over in that country and see how their personal beliefs are absurd or their personal religion is absurd. Therefore, if I have integrity, even though it doesn't feel like mine are, surely there's no reason why I'm the one person who happened to be born into the one family who was completely enlightened, and my opinions happen to be the right ones, and there's nothing beyond opinion. Obviously, they look at us the same way we look at them and say, well, hang on a second, that's a crazy ass religion. Why the heck do you have those opinions? Well, that's a crazy opinion about how to live or the meaning of life. Why do you have them? So being rational is to be able to answer the question, why? Not who. That's a question of authority. Who is to say? No. What is to say? Why is it the case? Which is a question of causes. So this second search for causes, or true philosophy or true learning, a lot of people are attracted to it because they see it as a breath of fresh air. That's finally someone's being rational. Being able to say, hey, let's just be rational. We all admit that, we all realize that to fix a toaster, you have to understand how it works and understand the problem. Remove the problem, gain the excellence of the toaster. Both are based on understanding. Same way with flying a plane, same way with medicine, same way with fixing a bike. Why is it that we're not applying it to ourselves? Or religion. Okay, religion means belief, but the nature of the divine, let's say. Or politics. It seems stupid. Why are we not solving problems in society based on understanding? Why is that allowed to be run by people with objectively irrational and harmful opinions? So coming across a system that says, hey, yeah, you can understand and everything is understandable and it's good that you understand. In fact, understanding is a step to a higher level of functioning, and understanding is part of the game. Phew, finally someone's making sense. I'm sick of all these monkeys talking nonsense.
I don't want to eat a monkey.
I don't want to eat what these monkeys are serving.
I don't want to eat a monkey.
Says Joe Rogan.
I don't want to eat a monkey.
I don't want to eat a monkey. But equally so, some people are drawn to philosophy because they're interested not primarily in understanding, but primarily in their own state of being, their own consciousness, their own experience of the moment, or of mind, or of self, or the way that they experience their understanding in mind. Those are the two ways in, both of which would be needed for a true spiritual tradition. It's no use having understanding without actually integrating it into your experience. Otherwise, what's the point? The fame of getting a PhD or a fame of publishing a paper? The desire for money that comes with getting tenureship? For it to be meaningful, it has to affect our own state of consciousness, not just in this world, which we know is temporary. We're only here for a short amount of time compared to eternity, but a kind of change in our way of being or consciousness or way of viewing reality, the way of relating to understanding mind and self and reality, as well as our understanding of ourself, mind or reality, and logos. Really the three biggies: logos or understanding, mind or reality, and the self that experiences. So either understanding or experience, both is needed in this personal development. We take a degree at college to gain understanding so that it will make us better, so that we will be happier. Likewise, the problem with drugs is you might have an experience of happiness, but without understanding or having understanding and integration as the method, it's fleeting and you can become a drug addict. And there are a lot of people addicted to various things like that. So, why are we talking about that now? Well, we are seeing that The first step of our learning, as prescribed by Socrates, is this second search for causes, which means we're in the logos because it's to do with being or the cause of things, including the cause, as he said in the text, the cause of us to be able to even reflect in this way, the cause of understanding. So we have to be in the text and repeat it. So lots of these podcasts have been going through the text and reviewing, reflecting, repeating, applying it to the questions in chat, applying it to our own lives, applying it to ourselves. But then we have to understand understanding and apply that understanding that we are understanding to those things we've been trusting. So that's our first stage, the rationality. That first thing that draws people in, the understandability of reality. Finally, let's stop being silly and start to grow up a little bit, have a much more mature relationship with ourselves and the world and each other, just by simply being rational. And by the way, the more rational we are, the more friendly we are, the more empathetic we are, the more able to solve problems we are, the more able to create a sustainable, harmonious, equal reality. So the more fun our human experience becomes as well. So it's win-win-win-win-win for understanding. Of course, we also have to understand why understanding can be difficult. What is the appeal to non-understanding? Why is it that it seems to be that most people or our society or our systems in society are not based on understanding? In other words, what's false? How do we remove what isn't true? Why is it when Socrates says, hey, we can all understand, and look at what a great guy I am, the reaction to the state was to murder him? You and your understanding, what? Down with you, Socrates. What a bunch of idiots. Or maybe that's dismissive. What is the cause for understanding to be difficult to share in the world? What is the cause for it to require some work and effort, patience, discipline, for us to practice the virtues? Hey, why don't we start with philosophy? Why do we have to go through philomathesis, the repeating the text and trusting the logos first? Why is there that transition? Why is it that no one around was doing this other than Socrates? Why is it that almost no one in our society, I watch TV, there is no one on TV doing this. Ain't no politicians talking in this way that I've ever seen. Why? Why don't we love understanding? That, for me, has been very bizarre. I've always been puzzled by this, and this is part of what we have to do. Understand understanding and understand non-understanding, because the dialectic, or understanding, requires side A and side B. What if it is? What if we have the dialectic or dianoia? And what if we don't? So this is the second stage, what we're going through this time. And of course, we have been seeing that the only way, or the best way, or the most holistic way, or maybe the true way of going into that second thing that draws people in, their state of consciousness, why people like or do anything really, to be happier and to be made better. That experience, the highest experience possible, by definition, would be the highest experience of mind itself. That which we are directing our dialectic, our understanding to. Beauty itself. Not beauty as an adjective. That's a beautiful dog. That's a beautiful person. Beauty itself. And if the union with things that we consider beautiful gives us the most pleasure in our world, what would be the union with beauty itself like? What would that feeling be like? Not only a physical union, but a complete union, because ousia, or mind, doesn't suffer from the limitations of physical connection. Two physical things might connect on this plane here, but this part of the hand doesn't connect with this part of the hand, and so on. Mine doesn't have that limitation. Another problem with connecting with your beloved or object of beauty is it ends. So we have romantic language, which fantasizes the idea of eternal union. I will be with you, my beloved, until the stars fall out of the sky. Oh my God, how romantic is my crush. He is rizzing me hard. Right? Romantic language plays into that ideal. Eternal connection in the best way, without limitations, with the most beautiful. Now that's literally a description of nous. Of course, the other objects of our reflection, of our understanding, describe it as well. Goodness itself, justice itself, equality itself, greatness itself. In fact, the highest language, the highest words we have in our language, the highest adjectives or descriptors are experienced directly as nouns in that experience of nous, which is why people are so comfortable with calling it enlightenment. It's enlightenment. I have woken up. I have seen the light. And that's not a personal description. Objectively, I can't imagine a greater experience. And objectively, using the understanding of language itself, you cannot use a greater word than beauty itself, than justice itself, putting it all together into ousia. And you're right. So, what is that? That's our goal. The second stage of our reading of the text, practicing, training the dialectic, is a transition into that experience that can be called nous. Or in English, we call it knowledge with a capital K. It's also contemplation. So we can understand the 3 stages of learning as the 3 stages of meditation. Concentration, sustained concentration, meditation, and the goal of meditation is to unite with the object of focus. For us, the object of understanding or the object of the dialectic, that's contemplation, where you unite with it. That's what we've been talking about. That's nous. But of course, there have been many people who have had experience of nous in various different ways. That's not spirituality unless we can understand it. It's no use using that experience to solidify or bolster or justify our ignorance. What is not true. So we have to come with a understanding to make sense of it, which would also include an understanding of what isn't true, so we're not justifying or becoming more firmly entrenched in what ain't. But also integrating it. We don't want it as a one-off. We want to be this way, not just whatever happens, we want to maintain that state. So maintaining, and not only in this life, but on to the next ones. So this is what makes it a spiritual tradition. And that is the third reading. If the end or the goal or the defeating of the big boss in our second reading is a transition into nous, we want to turn that nous into phronesis, integrate it, understand it, separate, use it as a model to separate what isn't true. And as Socrates saying, literally, that kind of state of self, phronesis, is definitionally the ticket into the 6th dimension, because it's a state of being that can be maintained. So you don't have to reincarnate. That's what we're calling the 6th dimension, where Socrates is headed and where he is telling us to meet him as quickly as we can. So that third reading is that integration or the maintaining. And that's what Socrates said, I'm going to tell you how I got into philosophy. I'm not going to solve the puzzle for you. I'm going to give my personal anecdote. You have to pull out the relevant aspects. You have to put it together. And I want you to come back to me and do a dialectic on it to me. That's what we're doing. He said, number one, I had to start by getting interested in the causes in mind, what we are calling loving of learning. Then that was a lead into philosophy. That's what we figured out in the text, what that involves. But then he said there has to be something to maintain it. There's our third level of reading. And then finally he said, by the way, there's one more secret one that I'm not going to mention. There has to even be a cause of all of those three. Now, we have a little bit of work in our back pocket because we've been talking about the virtues. We've been looking at patterns. We can recognize, hang on a second, that's a curious way of talking, Socrates. You are saying that, my pen. You are saying that there is the learning, philomathesis, there is philosophy, well, that's philomathesis, or philosophy, or what we're calling understanding, dianoia. There is philophronesis, but above that triad, there is one more called the cause even of that, or the third level of cause. Now that's interesting because we have seen this pattern before. And this is part of reading, looking for patterns. We talked about the virtue of temperance or sound-mindedness, which was to do with our desires or our belly, to use a metaphor. Courage, to do with our outward seeking or heart. And then we also had the virtue of wisdom, that which gives philosophy its name, which is to do with our reasoning. But this is a triad that has within all of that a higher level called justice, which is in each of those. So justice has its effect in each of them. So it's causal, but also is the greater whole that they all seek. So also, you need all of these three to reach up there. So this will help us reflect on what the heck is Socrates talking about with there being, right, something even more grand causes the brilliant light of being. So this experience of phronesis or nous, or the brilliant light of being, nous plus dianoia, has to have a cause beyond it. So this is our second reading. The third reading will be taking that experience and seeing what he calls this maintains. How do we maintain or integrate? If we can, that's what gives us phronesis, or access to a state which allows us access to the club, the sixth dimension where Socrates is. But there might be another level of reading which Socrates is calling a third, search for causes. And that can be confusing, but we have another example of a triad, which means a 3, with a monad, and together gives us a quadrad. Or a 4. Now, so we've seen this twice. What's that established for us? A pattern. What do we do with patterns? We have fun. We push the implications. Where else have we seen a list of 4? Well, we've seen a list of 4 with the dialectic. We've got definition, demonstration, division, and then synthesis analysis. Which of these would be a triad, and which could overarch all of them? I don't know. I don't see it yet. But that's a good question. So what do we do with a good question? We put it in our inventory, in our question sack, and we carry it with us. That's how we read. So one hypothesis would be the 3 Ds: definition, demonstrates, and divides. I like that because another way of looking at triads is activity, like Apollo, the activity of reading, philosophy, power, like Aphrodite, bringing it together into a whole, seeing it beautifully and applying it to our own, see how the parts come into a whole, and then Hermes, or the ruling, the ideal, or the being term. So maybe definition is the ruling, demonstration gives it a power, dividing seems to fit nicely with activity. So this is an example of how to play. One plus 2 is 3, 3 plus 3 is 6, and 3 plus 4 is 10. Triads. I don't see the connection. 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you say more about that in chat? So division sounds like dividing it up, which sounds like an activity. So I'm happy with this. But what about, does that mean synthesis and analysis is like justice, is like the 3rd level? I don't know. I mean, we did need to have all of these to reach justice, but also justice is also within each of them. If justice is doing your intended purpose, then the intended purpose of our desires or belly is to seek the art of the dialectic, which is temperance. The intended function of our outward activity is to do this, even if it can be scary or different, or if people tell us that we're silly. So courage is the intended function of our heart. So justice is in courage. So in one way, we all need all of those things to have a harmonious soul so that our soul can be doing its intended function. So we need to have definition, demonstration, division, so we can then do the synthesis analysis, reflect back on the whole thing to understand it as a whole and understand it in a new way, and maybe even understand its higher cause. So I like that. But in another way, the top-down way, I don't see how synthesis analysis is in each of them. Or maybe that's important. To give a definition, you have to synthesize all of the parts into a definition. To analyze, to make sense of, maybe that's self to self. This self here, so self to self is definition. So what is beauty itself? This self is a synthesis of the parts of this and also allows us to analyze it. So actually, maybe that does work. Another way of looking at it would be maybe definition is above everything. It's the self itself, definition. And the activity would be synthesis analysis. That does seem to be the thing where we have to put in the most creative activity. analysis. Then to follow the order, maybe demonstrating is the being. The power is how it divides up. I don't know. I could see an argument for both. But this is the sort of thing we do. We started with a question. What's our question? Oh, we started with a pattern, by the way. And then what do we do with a pattern? We push the implications or push the consequences. Where else do we see a four-term thing? This is our Sherlock Holmes hat. So we see a pattern. A triad or a quadrad. Actually, triad, monad, and quadrad. Monad means one. Triad is a pattern of three. Monad is a pattern of one. We've got one at the top, and quadrad is probably not a real word, but I like it because it's rad, like add, and quad for four. Then we push the implications. Or the consequences. And that brought us into, okay, what other triads, monads, or quadrads do we have? Well, we have the dialectic, that's a big one. Interesting. And then we came up with a question, which is what? How can we see in this framework the DDAS of the dialectic? Is that question? And then after the question, we create a hypothesis. A possible if that might explain, give an answer to the question. So that's how we've been playing. Now, if that's how we've been playing, then in our second reading, our job is to look for the dialectic wherever we can. Then we can push the implications of that, so now what we can do is we can connect questions together. Connect questions or hypothesis together to create even bigger ones. So we also had another question: how can we see the dialectic in everything we do? Because that's our second reading. That's philosophy, mastering the art of dialectic. So if that's what we're bringing into here, can we see the dialectic structure in this? Is there a dialectic structure in looking for patterns, pushing the implications, developing a question, developing a hypothesis, connecting them together, carrying them with us? Why? Because all of this is what we are discovering in reading. We are learning to read. The late great Dr. Pierre Grimes said, I have done nothing except, well, what I really do is teach people how to read. So we are learning to read in a new way. New way of reading, which is a puzzle, which is a Sherlock Holmes, which is a Gandalf, which is the quest of man, which is the true hero's journey. All of those things, we're learning a new way of reading. But we also have to make sense of it. Why? What is the higher paradigm of which they're a part? It's probably going to have to do with the dialectic. So how can we see the dialectic in here somehow? That's a even better question. You're reading to the dialect. You're reading somehow has to do with the dialectic structure. So this is a fantastic question that we have and we'll carry with us as we read, as we go through. Lots and lots and lots and lots of fun. So this is all to understand what we're doing now. We're going through a second level of reading, and then after, if there are enough people in chat and in the community on Discord and whatever who, having gone through that, have an experience of nous, go from concentration to meditation to contemplation, then our next reading will be integration. Or Socrates says, I got into philosophy through the second search of causes, but then I had to ask the question, what maintains that level of mind? And then, of course, there was a third question, what is the cause even of that? And in the text, Socrates gave us another hint, maintain. And one of the ways he gives hints is by giving us the negative so that we can flip it. Because the dialectic has side A and side B. Write it down somewhere. Yeah, here we go. Side A and side B. The three terms: definition, demonstration, division, synthesis, analysis. If it is, and if it isn't. So one way of giving puzzles is to tell us about what it is by giving us one of these four, sorry. Maybe I'm going to give you this one so you can flip it and gain an understanding about what it is. That's one good way of being a good teacher, because a good teacher does not say, hey, trust me, bro, or just believe me. And of course, there are some famous modern philosophers like Hegel and Kant who say, oh, what's the nature of God? Oh, it's this, and just trust me, because God wouldn't deceive us. Or it's not proper to ask these questions. So we can take this understanding later on in the channel if we apply our mastery of the dialectic to Hegel and Kant and all of the ones that are traditionally called philosophers in our day, to see where did they miss the mark. Because Socrates says part of the art of the logos is using it to judge where we are at in our progression to our destiny and where we are stuck. And everyone's somewhere between here by being a human being. But enough to say, a good teacher doesn't say set level of trust. They will say understand it yourself. Here are some questions. Solve the questions. Anyone who says, hey, just have faith in me, just trust me, just have hope, like a politician or a cult leader or somebody in religion, because religion means to be bound by a belief. Anyone who silences or tries to get you to stop, Emperor Justinian, who created the Catholic tradition, the Christian power structures and tradition, did so, and he killed a lot of people who were interested in understanding. Began the Dark Ages, shut down the academy, burnt the libraries down, killed anyone who wanted to hold a Bible themselves, because those people would start to think for themselves. And thankfully, we are far enough away from that experience that we can reflect on it and say, oh my God, that is objectively unjust. And if we learn philosophy, we can see why it is. Specifically, because he's preventing us from reaching the level of right learning, to have our nose in the text and be reading and repeating. Also, after that right learning or trust in the logos, we have to go to our own understanding, and that's specifically banned. You can't understand. You're a filthy peasant. You're not one of the wealthy elite who are chosen by God. Of course, today, that same terrible bollocks way of talking is used by rich people. I deserve to have all the stuff and to oppress anybody, act out my tyranny wherever I want to with all my money, not because I'm chosen by God, as a pope or a king might say, but because I am naturally better and chosen by the free market, because I have all the monies, yum, 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 yum. And I sit on it like a dragon and prevent it from entering the flow of the society, which is what money is for, to flow around. And anyone who puts a dam in that river and creates a little river for themselves and sits on it like a dragon sitting on his gold is ruining it for everyone. And instead of looking at the causes for that, they will say, oh no, I'm chosen by God. What? Yes. Prosperity gospel. Okay, sometimes they don't say I'm chosen by God, I'm chosen by the free market, which is the same language. Faith language. There's no reason or evidence as to have faith, which is an absurd belief. There is no reason why the market picks people who are better. We know that people like Elon Musk are terrible people acting in terrible ways. Of course, not completely terrible. No one's completely terrible, or maybe very, very few. Somewhere between stuck in a problem and a level of development along the logos. We could put Elon Musk somewhere down here. So he's not better. That's absurd. To believe that is to be absurd. Sometimes we call that being a Elon simp. Namaste. Welcome. I hope you enjoy the stream and chat. Right. So, but it's the same language, isn't it? It's the language of anti-logos, rejecting the logos, because right learning is to have a certain rational trust in the logos, which is rational itself, which is rationality itself. But anti-logos is to reject that for superstitious belief, the free market, and even the justification for some people having all of the monies and oppressing everyone else. They have an expression, the invisible hand, which is supposed to invoke religious thinking. So often the people who are already brainwashed into thinking this way will be more likely to say, oh yeah, I believe there's an invisible hand guiding everything because I believe in the spaghetti monster in the sky. I'm specifically picking, there are hundreds of different gods, thousands. I'm picking a nonsense one, so nobody feels like they're being personally attacked. But just insert religious deity here. He's controlling everything. That's what I've been taught to have faith in. So when a capitalist says, oh, it's the invisible hand, that feels right. And this is why it's important to do the dialectic, because we don't just find out what is true, we use our dialectic to solve what isn't true. After Socrates gave us a reasoned, rational, flowing together, not cooperative, but friendly, guided logos of why the soul is immortal and reincarnation exists, that wasn't sufficient. Why? Because Simmias and Cebes had a false belief, a kind of faith, about something else that felt true, that seemed probable. So Socrates had to, after giving us the logos that we trust in, say, hey, don't just trust the logos, develop your own understanding. And I'm going to demonstrate applying it to what isn't. I'm going to address your false beliefs, which can block you. We need to do both. We have to remove what's false and improve or perfect or gain what is true, both of which are in the dialectic. This is important. And anybody who says just that level of trust is keeping you stuck in prison, boo to them. We say it's higgledy-piggledy nonsense.
Come on, man. Flibbity-jibbity nonsense.
Flibbity-piggity What do you say, Joe?
Flibbity-jibbity nonsense.
Flibbity-jibbity nonsense. So they're not being a good teacher. They're actively harming you if they say stay at the level of trust. So, well, not really at the level of trust, faith or hope. Socrates is saying go beyond that to trust in reason and then go from trust to dianoia. And that's our second reading that we're doing now. And then even dianoia is not the end, of course. Dianoia, or understanding the logos, not understanding Kant's opinions or Hegel's opinions. That's not understanding the logos. That's why we're reading Socrates, because he is speaking of the logos. The logos is speaking through him. There's been many examples in the text of that being explained. But also he has a level of mastery of the logos himself. And again, we've got reasons to trust this that we eventually will need to verify for ourselves. But you've got to start a trust. You've got to start by trusting the mechanic if you're an apprentice, but having reason to trust it. He can demonstrate it in some way. He can use it in some way. He can fix a car. For Socrates, he can do a dialectic. He can talk about what the true earth looks like, all those sorts of things. But even that understanding, our second reading, is a gateway into the direct experience, the verifying for ourselves. The bumper sticker is, you don't send your slave to the banquet in your place if there is something called ultimate beauty, or the true nature of reality, or the experience of which is bliss. You want to go there. You want to go. Hooray! That's where the party is, and every good party has balloons. More balloons. There we go. All right, so that's what makes it a spiritual tradition, or the spiritual tradition. And then our second reading is to maintain it. And as we said, if we need to be doing both A and B, one of the ways that Socrates can test if we're actually playing, or if we're being a filthy casual noob and just skimming it, or skimming the text so we can read it in a way that will justify our opinions, like how they normally teach philosophy at school, because they don't teach how to read. We are still discovering how to read, how to maintain it. And one of the ways to test if you're in the game is Socrates will give you side B, and if you're playing, you will realize, ooh, that's part of the dialectic. Ooh. But if I'm playing the dialectic, I have to take side B and do side A. So this idea of maintaining in the text, he gave us the side B. Let's read it together. So and he goes on to say, hey, the people who aren't philosophers, but here's what we said just a second ago. Most people are between the extremes. So when we said Elon Musk is a bit of a jerk, if we had a contest of worthlessness, there would be very few winners. In other words, not everybody is worthless. There are a few within the extremes. Like there are the very short and the very tall. There are a few that are on those extremes. Part of the art is to judge. To judge with the art where you are. And also, he went on to say, the people who are not philosophers, side B. I'm Iolaus. Iolaus is Hercules' friend, assistant. We are Hercules. He's saying, you do this like a good teacher. You are Hercules on the true hero's quest. I am Iolaus. Iolaus is Hercules' our friend and assistant. Okay, we don't want to have a hatred of logos because we don't use the logos ourselves with the art of the dialectic to judge for ourselves, understanding those people who are not philosophers, who are anti-logos, contradictors, silence the logos. We talked about Emperor Justinian and the Christian tradition of killing the philosophers. Socrates was killed by the state. Shutting down the logos, people who say, I don't want to talk about it, or get out of here, you, I don't want to talk to you, you're not good enough to answer questions, to ask questions. gatekeeping, excluding, excommunicating. Violence is a way of shutting down the Logos. War. All of these people shut down the Logos. We call them debate bros sometimes. Like talking heads on TV. They rarely open up the Logos. They usually shut down through yelling and appeals to prejudices and fears of the people. These are anti-Logos. They will try and convince you that there is no rationality, there's nothing to learn, and then understand, and then directly experience, and then integrate, and then master as an art, and then take you with you to a higher dimension, beyond even that, where Socrates is going. So all of those stages we've been learning about, they will completely reject because they say that they are the smart ones because they know how to contradict people. Usually because they're imitating their own teachers. When they were a kid, they had a question, why does this happen? And their parent might go, oh, because of this. Why does that happen? Because of this. Why does that happen? Shut up. God made a hell for people like you who ask too many questions. Or parents think they're clever if they can shut up a kid or whatever. So, or, people get good jobs if they can maintain the status quo by the oppressors or the wealthy elite or those that benefit short-term from capitalism. And they get given jobs on news networks if they can shut people up, create fight, create conflict, be bad faith actors. And we know a lot of, there's the meme, I believe this terrible oppressive right-wing fascist belief, prove me wrong. And there's a picture of that dude who's a real jerk, who never wants to actually be proven wrong. His job is to contradict the Logos. We learned that at school too, debating, or if you ever did law, you realize that they're not interested in the Logos, the truth. They're not interested in benefiting everybody and understanding the causes of problems, addressing them within a soul to benefit them, addressing the conditions and causes within society to improve the society. Nuh-uh, they're interested in winning. I think when I studied law, the first story they told me was about like a famous American president who was to defend some person who was obviously guilty, but he used certain tricks. He looked up at the ceiling and he asked bizarre questions to manipulate the jury to give the wrong decision, and that was lauded as the ideal of law. Funny that the first year of law, that this is the ideal, the ability to trick people so that they can make a bad judgment that's not based on truth to win. So that we can call that anti-Logos. So it's embedded within our system. And of course it is, because we've only had this text for 5 years. Because of those barbaric, savage, ignorant habits of humanity that we haven't yet uncovered and removed with the art of the Logos and developed an understanding of the ideal. What is actually, how we should actually relate to each other, our planet, our problems. Okay, so if we don't listen to Socrates, we would have the problems that we have had for the last 2,500 years. And we are, simply by reading this text and following along with integrity and an open mind and a curious interest, we are seeing for ourselves why that's the case. And why is it? These people who spend their time contradicting the Logos, they will believe they are the most wise. They should rule. They should be on TV. They should have all the money. Why? Because they alone have thoroughly understood that there is no soundness or stability among the realities, the very thing that we understand or we reflect on in our second search for causes. What is being? What is reality? What is mind? Nothing's sound or stable. Shut up. Do something else. Get back to work, peasant. Or any Logos. There isn't anything understandable. That Logos that we're supposed to trust in our first reading and repeat, it doesn't exist. That's nonsense. It's just opinion. Right? And of course, there's no art. Without there being an ideal and reality that's knowable, without there to be an understandable structure, the dialectic, to understand and utilize and use that ideal, there is no art. Just like without there being an ideal healthy body, if a cancer body is just as healthy as a healthy body, just as these anti-Logos people say, hey, my fascist beliefs are just as true as your helpful beliefs or your philosophical beliefs. right? If we can't judge beauty and ugliness, justice, injustice, that there is no logos allowing us to think, then there is no art. Why? Because there's no ideal in reality, and there's no understandability that you can use in relation to the ideal. So what will they do? Well, they will end up messing with you, abusing you, manipulating you, as we see. And people, if they don't realize that it's not the logo's fault, it's that they haven't themselves mastered the art so they can judge these anti-logos people, then they will spend their rest of their life hating and reviling the logos. That is the greatest defect of the soul. Where did he say it? No greater defect than to hate the logos. Or the villain's origin story, because he relates it to hating human beings. If you don't realize it's that you didn't judge them, that's why. And why is it the greatest defect? If you hate and revile the logos, you will be deprived of the truth of beings and knowledge. And we can also understand it as you won't ever have your first reading of the text, Philomethesis, where you read, trust the logos and repeat it, and learn the virtues, which itself is a repetition, is a practice. You won't go through your second reading of the Phaedo, where you apply the dialectic to it, and then you won't trigger that third reading, which is the actual experience of the truth of beings and knowledge, and integrate it into a state of spiritual enlightenment. And then, of course, you'll miss out on the fourth, which is the super mega question dynamite that we're carrying. What the heck is the cause even of that of enlightenment? True enlightenment, understandable, maintainable. So now we're seeing why what Socrates said in our first reading is the case. We have to guard against this condition. By the way, those who do not have a philosophical attitude, they're not lovers of this, lovers of dianoia and wisdom, but are lovers of philonikos, lovers of fighting. People who just spend their time shutting down the logos, what do they love? They love some good old drama and gossip. Yay! You want to make money on YouTube, you want fame or wealth, as these people are motivated by. Not lovers of, they're three parts of the soul: lovers of reasoning, learning, lovers of outward moving, fame, honor, lovers of the. So we have our snowman to represent the idea, the aspects of the soul. We'll put it next to the virtues because the virtues can correspond to them. We have our snowman with our desire part of our soul, can be sometimes represented by the belly. Our heart is the middle part of the snowman. That's our outward moving, what moves us out in the world. And then our smallest part of the snowman is our reasoning. Put over the side. Reasoning, part of our snowman. Now, Socrates said either both or some combination of these. Lover of honor or fame, lover of money. If you want to get famous or rich on YouTube, what do? Start a beef. This is why Mr. Beast is the worst and I'm the best. This is why, I don't know. Mr. Beast is a good one because the drama is around him at the time of this recording. And of course, obviously he is someone, like most people within our society, motivated by lots and lots of money and being famous, and a combination of both. We would ask him questions to get him involved in the love of reasoning. Smiley face. So we can see temperance, desiring the dialectic, courage, doing it, seeking it, practicing it. This is our second reading. So you could say our third reading would be the integration in a state of wisdom. But in our text, what are we reading? We're reading Socrates say, hey, these people, lovers of fighting, lovers of beef and drama, right? Oh, it's salacious. isn't it interesting? Oh, and Mr. Beast says this. Oh, and Tom Cruise is doing that. Oh, it's so interesting. Oh, Donald Trump and Joe Biden.
I don't want to eat a monkey.
Oh, when Joe Rogan does that weird thing.
Come on, man.
When Joe Biden does that
Flibbity
thing.
jibbity nonsense.
Right? So these lovers of contention, they are unenlightened, important, because we seek enlightenment. They will believe they're enlightened, by the way, because they believe that they are wise and they thoroughly understand. Okay? Here's a big problem. This is an interesting thing that we can pull out. They won't know whether the logos under discussion maintains. This is our key word.
Come on, man.
Maintains any phronesis and ousia. So there's a funny word which has phronesis and ousia combined, which is a clue about what phronesis is, because the truth of real being that we get through mastering the logos or the dialectic is called ousia. That's the realm of being. Phronesis is the integration into it, into a state of self, which is another cool section of the text. He calls it a state of self. They won't have this state of self, so they won't know whether or not the logos under discussion maintains it. So taking this, that's what it isn't. These people don't have this, but then we have to flip it if we're reading, if we're paying attention. If that's side A or side B, what isn't the case, then what is would mean that we have to, if we do reach phronesis, if we do trust the logos and repeat it in our first reading, if we do our second reading and apply the dialectic to it to gain dianoia, and then if after our second reading, especially maybe when we tackle the big boss at the end, the true earth, which is funny, in Japanese role-playing games, there's a meme or a joke about it, that you start off collecting 5 flowers, but the last level you have to defeat God. Like, they're really epic at the end. It's interesting because the big boss of this text is literally the true earth, or the realm of being, which is the cause of our physical world. So you'd be defeating God. So that's funny, to me anyway. So if we do go through our second reading and we do have that experience of nous, or the realm of being, and we do reach it through our practice, and therefore we're doing the virtues, then we will have that state of phronesis, which means we will have a way of testing whether or not the logos under discussion can maintain that state of self, that state of enlightenment. Just for fun, let's jump back into the text and look again at that section of state of self, because that's one of the few times he makes a direct statement about what phronesis is. Let's get just quickly touch on it, because it's a big question. We'll get to it later. If we're dragged about by the body and its perceptions, we will wander about confused and dizzy as if we're drunk. But if we do this work, remove what isn't true and learn with the dialectic what is, then we'll pass into that realm. So here's our enlightenment experience, or the realm of being, or the true earth, or nous, that is pure, eternal, and deathless. Put these words into your dialectic on that realm, because that's what we're doing. Have a document open or a notepad open and say, what if being exists on side A? Put these words, pure, eternal, deathless. That's our practice.
Wow.
Okay, we pass into that realm. We remain and abide in the same way. There's a part of us that stays the same. Now, I'm not sure whether it's a memory or you will always have that part of you in that realm. I'm not sure, but let's keep reading. By always being akin with self, and also becomes that whenever she arises into self according to self. And then we know this expression, self according to self, is self according to self, the first category of the dialectic. Where's the one that we had before? This is too far away. Let's move it closer. Self according to self is the first stage of the dialectic. So, might be a clue, maybe. It's a question and a hypothesis we keep open and we carry. So if you rise into that realm, always being akin with self, according to self, so maybe we're always doing the dialectic, maybe, would fit with our understanding of the virtues, then you become that. And you cease from your wandering, so the cause of our problems, removing what's false, and we always remain according to the same in the same way. About those beings, we're in the realm of beings, hooray! Insofar as she remains in contact with such beings, this state of self is called phronesis. And then CB says, beautifully said, the word is beautiful and true. So beauty and truth, two of those realms of being are being used in the dialectic to judge whether or not that reasoning is true. So here we have CB's giving us a demonstration of what it would be like to use that state of contact with beauty itself and truth itself to judge whether or not the logos is itself true. The level that CB's is reaching out to. And the greater we have, if we have experienced it, and if we can stay with it, the greater we can judge whether or not the reasoning of the logos at the end of the dialectic is beautifully said and truthfully said. But we're also saying, hang on a second, this not only can we use it in our understanding stage, our first and second level of reading. What happened? But Socrates is saying, hey, that's your second search for causes. You also have to look at what maintains that state of phronesis. And so equally so, if we have that state, we can see whether the logos under discussion maintains the phronesis. But the others, the non-philosophers, only care about whether what they say are believed by others that they're talking to. So of course, yes, Mr. Beast doesn't care about the truth or goodness. He cares whether or not he can be believed to be good, or believed to be a cool dude, or believed to be worth children following and giving their money to. Same thing with Fox News. They are not a news network. It was proven in court because they lie all the time, and someone tried to sue them and they said, we're not a news network, we just call ourselves that. Which is freaking terrible. There should be a principle by which we all have to tell the truth, especially on television, because people can be manipulated by these people in the worst possible way, causing the greatest defects of our soul. So it's important to follow the truth. Altogether true was our conclusion. So telling the truth should be important, especially if you're calling yourself news. But they don't care about that. They just care about the people present believing what they say is true. And by the way, they won't have that state of mindfulness to have to see whether or not the logos maintains it. So that's our third level of reading. Whether or not our reading, we can go through, look at the arguments, look at the logos, look at the dialectics that was used, and judge it against our state of mind of phronesis ousia, or phronesis, and ousia. And that's our third state of reading. So hopefully we'll go through the text. Oh, that logos really helped my state of phronesis, or maintaining or bringing up that memory of being, or bringing me back into it, or reconnecting with it in some way. Wow, that's interesting. I really naturally have a desire to maintain this logos, to stay in the dialectic, to follow the logos. It's not an effort anymore that we go through in practice in these two stages. So if we saw that the virtues are all desiring, acting, reasoning, and functioning, which is the whole, with the art of the dialectic, desiring the art of the dialectic, not desiring money, seeking the art of the dialectic, not seeking fame, reasoning with the art of the dialectic, not reasoning according to your faith or belief or opinions or prejudices or anything else. If that's the virtues that we have to practice and repeat in our true learning, that we have to apply to the dialectic in our true philosophy, see how this represents the dialectic, which was interestingly one of the questions we came up with. We said, how can we see the dialectic structure in our reading, but how can we see the dialectic structure too in the virtues? These 1, 2, 3, 4, these three in the monad, can we see the dialectic structure in the virtues? So that's what we do in true philosophy, or philodianoia. But when we get to phronesis, remember it was said in the text, this is the true currency how do you spell currency? Maybe it wasn't currency. This is the... Okay, let's just find it. Right, so here's where he talks about, here we go. So, he talks about what the vices aren't, to master some pleasures. So here we are in our pleasure part of our desire part of soul. To master some of them, in order to be mastered by others, to master your drinking so you can gamble better, that's not true virtues. That's not true phronesis. That comes by a lack of discipline. So it starts with discipline and practice. He's talked about nurturing. It's something we got to do consciously. We have to use our will. And the more we see the beauty in the text, the more we'll desire it, and it'll be easier to do. The more we're in this community, on the channel, on YouTube, on Twitch, on Discord, the more we will have support to do it as a discipline, as a training. But that training, here's our currency, that which is the currency you trade in all your virtues for is phronesis. So these four virtues, wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, are true virtues, the true virtues when they're united with phronesis. So there's our 4 with another monad. So now we have a heptad, I think, or what's 5? Pentad. We have our pentakill, if you play League of Legends. Our pentad of a 3, which has justice, dikaios, not righteousness, as the monad, but above that, they all are united with phronesis. So there's our 5. Keep that in mind. There's a 5 we have in our back pocket. Let's quickly throw that in, just in case it comes up later. So we also have a phronesis. That's the true currency for which all of these that we get through practice are traded in for. Now, why do we care? Well, that's the spiritual initiation experience. That's the mystic rite. They used to be esoteric and only told to certain people, but we're telling everybody because no time to mess around anymore. These anti-logos people who are manipulating and abusing humans, and they are also actively destroying the planet and maybe leading humanity to extinction. No time to keep them secret anymore. But also, when we have this initiation, we've done our purpose. So this is our meaning of life, the purpose of life. We will be in the mud, and we saw that, the inner parts of the true earth. But if you have been perfected and purified, removed what isn't true and done and figured out what is, both, you can dwell with the gods. That's the sixth dimension where Socrates is. Now, of course, they're going somewhere, so there's a seventh. That's our ultimate, super ultimate mega question dynamite that we're carrying with us. And many other people who call themselves spiritual and carry a staff, but the true spiritual people are those who are doing this. And by the way, those people in that sixth dimension, when you go to the realm of being with phronesis, and you've therefore removed what's false and perfected your art of what's true in the art of dialectic, these gods are masters and good friends. Hooray, we meet good friends.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Which means they're going somewhere. Actually, later on he calls them adventurers. So we read that a bunch of times. Fellow adventurers. So what does that mean? Well, suddenly we are in that state. Suddenly we are in that state of phronesis. So what we put in through a kind of practice and discipline, as we read, becomes automatic. We naturally desire true beauty because we're in it. We're staying in it. We want to maintain it now. It's bliss or the highest experience. We naturally seek it. We naturally use it for reasoning, as Seebees is doing. It's beautiful and true. These are aspects of being. Nous. The true earth. At the top. So this is the upgrade from the practice of virtues in our lover of learning, and then our dianoia in our second reading of the text that upgrades. So we have the upgrade noise into phronesis. So now we're in our third reading, which is how do we maintain it? What logos of the text maintains it? And we recognize that those who are anti-logos and philonikos, lover of contention, don't have that state. So they don't know whether or not they're talking about is nonsense, which is why the only paradigm, the only standard against which they judge what they're talking about to see whether or not it's worth talking about is whether or not they can make people believe them. So it gives them money and fame and a job on Fox or the Daily Wire or something. Because they don't have a standard. We get a standard here. That's why it's many other staff bearers. This is the true form of spirituality. So our third reading will be what logos maintains that state. And of course, there's that secret question, well, what's beyond that? Or what's the cause of even this state of enlightenment? Or if Socrates are meeting better men and gods, and later on he calls them fellows, marvelous fellows, fellow travelers and guides, fellow travelers and leaders at that proper place after completing the meaning of life in a pure and measured way. Pure is having the experience and purifying yourself from what's false. Measured is practicing at all times with the virtue. Remove your wandering, like we said, drawn around by the body. We have well-ordered and phronesis soul follows the guides. Otherwise, if we're passionately attached to the body, as we've said before, fearfully fluttering about the body in the visible realm. Okay? When we get to the afterlife, if we don't have this phronesis and art of the dialectic, people won't want to hang out with us. They'll be turned away by all. They won't be your fellow traveler and guide. You'll keep wandering completely at a loss until you're reincarnated into the proper habitation. But if you've completed your life's work, the meaning of life for all people, in a pure and measured way, you meet the gods as fellow travelers and leaders. As soon as you arrive at that proper place, we're calling the sixth dimension or the surface, not in the mud, in the underworld, the surface. But there are many and wonderful habitations belonging to the earth. That's where he goes on to talk more about the true earth, what it actually looks like, not what people say. But at the end, he says, so then he describes the pure earth. This is our final boss. Talking about the way it is, what it looks like. That's our final boss. And then about 10 pages later, he concludes, this is your destiny. This is, therefore, we call it the destiny of man, if it's the meaning of everybody's life. And by the way, have pleasure in this learning. Have fun. Not ignore the other pleasures. Don't get interested in fashion and adorning the body with fashion. Adorn the body with these virtues. And so virtues of sound-mindedness, temperance, dikaios, justice, the power of courage, freedom from what's false, the truth from your experience of nous. This is how we await our journey into the realm of being and become prepared when our allotted destiny summons us, when it is time for us. So there's a certain call up from the divine self, so to speak. He mentions that earlier, until the divine self liberates us. But take pleasure in this. Adorn your soul in this way. Risk this beliefs in the true love of learning. You benefit. Make myths. Sing myths about them. Use them in your storytelling, in your art, in your songwriting, in your fan fiction, in whatever it is that you are doing in your world. Use these to your myths. That will give you, should put you in good cheer to know that you know the meaning of life now, and you can harmonize your soul towards it, and you have good reason to risk the belief that you'll get there. And not only you can get there, you're supposed to get there. Understand why in our second reading, dialectic, and then once you have the nous, make sense of it with the dialectic. Talk about it with us in the community. Share your insights and experiences, especially enlightenment ones, with your friends. That's being in the game.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
And so, yes, so they're fellow adventurers. The prize is beautiful and the hope is great. Do so with excellence. And when they arrive in that place, you will have freedom and liberated, just as we talked about, liberating from our physical senses and desires in the virtues, and loving learning instead, and then loving the other dialectic instead, desiring that instead, seeking that instead, using that for our reasoning instead, using that in our conversation with people instead, the four virtues. Okay, that will allow you freedom when you're liberated from what's false of the body, your false beliefs, nailed to this identification with your physical body, nailing your soul to the body. There's a freedom and liberation. But also, if you do this, so our third reading, you will be liberated from the inner regions of the true earth as if from prisons, and you'll arrive at the above, the pure habitation, what we're calling the sixth dimension. So we're calling the physical world the third, call the soul the fourth, just for ease of language. The Hades, the fifth, but that has the underworld there. The pure habitation on the surface of the realm of being, we're calling the sixth. That's your home. If you have sufficiently purified yourself with philosophy, that's our second reading and third. And then you will altogether live without a body, because you can maintain that state of self. It doesn't lose its power. That's one of the qualities, defining qualities of phronesis. So you live all together in that place from that time hence, without a body. But you can go to even more beautiful habitations, which are not easy to describe clearly, nor do we have time. So there's our super ultra mega question dynamite. What the heck is this seventh dimension? So that's a huge recap of where we are, why we are where we are, what are we going to do now, why do we have to read this text the second time. There's still a few more pages after this description of the true earth. Well, let's keep that as a cliffhanger. Wow. Maybe when we go back after having read the text a bit more properly, or second round 2, applying the dialectic as we go through, when we go to this description of the true earth, it'll make more sense to us, and we'll have practiced the dialectic, and maybe it can fulfill its higher functioning. Not just giving us a trust in what the realm of being is like, what death is like, what reincarnation is like through trust. No. We'll have an understanding of it. Clap. And not just an understanding of it, we can verify our understanding in our direct experience, making it nous or the true spiritual tradition, integrating that. So then as our third reading, so then we can go back and read it a third time, see what can maintain that state of self in the realm of being or phronesis, or at least that memory of it. What logos can maintain it, because that will be our third reading. And of course, so therefore, when we go back to that true earth, it'll be a kind of final boss tester for our practice of the dialectic, which is our second reading. So, and then after we get that, maybe we can see the conclusion and see, because I don't want to, it's like getting to the final boss and then some other guy jumps into your game and says, hey, I can defeat the boss, let me solo her. And then somebody else solos the boss. But I've done all this work to upgrade my character, to learn the skills so that I can defeat the big boss. I'm gonna let somebody else do it. So that's why we're not gonna read the last few pages until we go through it again, so that the big boss can serve her final purpose, to hopefully give us an object of contemplation, the true earth, in detail, not what we're piecing together about beauty and justice, a huge literal description, or almost literal description of, because it's metaphorical, because it's not physical, so he's using physical analogies. So it's something like this. Risk the belief to give us a more specific focus for our dialectic. So previously we've been picking from pieces of the text, weaving it together in our dialectic of justice and beauty and being and the soul and reincarnation, all of those things in being, which is our object of learning. That's true learning, philomathesis. We've been piecing them together to make our own dialectic, true philosophy, the meaning of life, our purpose, along with purifying what's not true. What are your beliefs that stop you or contradict? How can you get rid of those? By the way, we are doing this on the channel as well, which is the formal application of the dialectic to specifically remove our false beliefs that limit us and prevent us. So enjoy that on the channel as well. It's called Philosophical Midwifery, the new paradigm for solving human problems. It says a, but it's really a new paradigm. It's the paradigm. And we're seeing why for ourselves. So, that's how we have been doing the dialectic up until now. But this final boss gives us the biggest focus. It's Melania at the end of Elden Ring. It's who's that big turtle at the end of Mario? What's his name? With the spikes and blows the fire? Bowser. He's Bowser at the end of Mario. So, we want to therefore make the most out of him as a focus for our dialectic that we have been training up in our second reading. To go from philomathesis, love of learning, to philosophy, love of dialectic. Or dianoia. Same. So that's why we're going through it again. Now, very exciting, very cool, but there are so many other cool things we could get to. Like, for example, this book. The author of this book, the guy who helped and encouraged our translator to give us this text that we could be doing our work on here, also wrote this book. Socrates and Jesus, a dialogue in heaven. The more we understand the dialectic, the more we'll be able to apply it to this book, where Socrates and Jesus, two big influential figures, Socrates helping us discover the meaning of life and reach our purpose, Jesus having his own life that influenced our culture heavily. They talk about the how far they got in the Logos and what their problems were. And what's the implications of us having to read Socrates through Plato and read Jesus through primarily Paul? So this is huge. No matter we like it or not, we are influenced by these two figures in some way. One probably more than another. And we want to get into this guy's work, Socrates. So we could read this book. That's very exciting. But we've been talking a lot about the virtues. So we should nail down the virtues for ourselves. So we could jump into the Republic, where he explains the virtues. But the Republic is a 10-book masterpiece. It's very long. It's a lot of pieces. If we go into the Republic with an even more practiced expertise in the dialectic, we might read it in a higher level. We might be able to make our reading the second reading. If we look for the dialectic in the Republic, we could skip the first reading of the 10 books where we just have to trust it and memorize it and repeat it. Actually, with the dialectic, we might be able to better memorize it because we can recognize the parts in a dialectical structure. So we'll be able to maybe do our love of learning even easier, memorize it even easier, just like if you're a musician and you want to remember a song, if you already know there's a verse, chorus, bridge, chorus structure in most songs, knowing that structure will help you remember songs. So if we train ourselves up in the Phaedo, when we jump into the Republic next, we will be able to remember it easier and do our love of learning. But also we might be able to, at the same time, apply the dialectic as much as we can to the whole and the part, so we can jump straight into second reading. Philosophy, love of dialectic, love of dianoia. Kill two birds with one stone. And as it's 10 books, it might be worth doing. Of course, on the channel, we're going to be maybe applying that same level of seeing to this text, the sense of music, which is very close to unpacking the logos of music. So if we are, as we're seeing in the text, if it is the paradigm, if the dialectic is the paradigm for all understanding, it's the logos, then you should be able to see it reflected in other things like geometry, astronomy, music, and so on, quantum physics. A lot of them we touch on in here. We talk about chaos theory and field theory and evolutionary theory. There's a lot of other systems of thinking in the physical world that you can apply the dialectic to really unpack and see at a high level, understand at a high level, but also use as a metaphor to help your understanding of reality, of self. So you can better understand the lower, but also use that to help you remember or better understand the higher. So that's something on the horizon for the channel. So very exciting. Like, we're at a level where we can see how to read, kind of. We have that big question. What exactly is reading? Something to do with looking for patterns, pushing the implications, developing a questions. And by the way, that was mentioned in the Phaedo. He says, hey, don't reason the way those haters or the anti-logos people or the lovers of drama and contention reason. Instead, say, hey, let's let them answer in that sophisticated way, academic way or gatekeeping way, maybe. But we answer in this new kind of way. Develop a hypothesis using your loftiest vision and understanding. See what the consequences that follow, the implications that follow. Are they in harmony or discord or disharmony with the other conclusions that we're learning? Which hypothesis comes to light best? So create a SAC, a collection of hypotheses. See which is sufficient. Now that's a question. What makes a dialectic sufficient? Well, one sense, it has to change our mind. It has to be convincing. For that, it has to show a logical necessity, a flowing on. It has to also be beautiful in some way, maybe trigger a memory of the experience, or maybe even trigger that enlightenment experience of nous. These are all things under sufficient. Also, don't mix the dry with the wet as the anti-logos people do by discussing causes with effects at the same time. So follow a structured way of doing your hypothesis. So you have to give birth to a question first, carry around your hypotheses. So this is Socrates giving us clues on how to read. So reflecting what we saw ourselves, looking for patterns. So how we discovered a question, looking for a pattern, push the consequences or implications of those patterns. If we see a pattern here, can we see it somewhere else? Get a question, get a hypothesis, push the consequences of your hypothesis, build hypothesis, collect hypotheses, carry them together, see if they work. So we are discovering this all seems to be reading, and therefore if the dialectic is the ultimate structure of understanding, can we see the dialectic within our learning of what reading is? So that's a question we're also carrying with us. So that's pretty cool. So now we have a pretty good understanding of our journey forward, our map. So before we jump into a 10-book reading of the Republic, just delete this guy. Before we jump into a 10-book reading of Republic, it might be worth going through this text once more, just because we're really familiar with it now, because we've really practiced our love of learning philomathesis. So we have the material to practice and train up. This is our training. This is why we have Goku in their thumbnails sometimes. The training up. And then we also have a big boss, a focus, an ultimate focus for that training up. That might awaken something for us together as a community, individually, or sharing your insights with the community. Make sure that you realize that philosophy is not a one-person game, but we will have a training and maybe also insight that we can take with us into our reading of the Republic, into this. Although I kind of want to get started on the music one too. So maybe I'll do this sometime this week as well. But specifically the Republic. So we'll do the Republic after the Phaedo, I think. And then maybe Jesus and Socrates. There's so many exciting things that are material that reflect the logos, that can therefore be objects of our meditation, can be video games, can be puzzles for us to solve, because this reflects the logos, the Republic obviously reflects the logos, this that we're reading together reflects the logos. We have a lot of material to gain insight and new understanding of, and do our job, do our purpose, the meaning of life, have material upon which we can master the art of dialectic. So very exciting. Maybe we'll just open up one more book, the music one, and then when we've finished our second reading of the Phaedo, if there's reason to read it a third time, if there's enough people who've had nous experiences, maybe we'll do it a third time. Otherwise, we'll jump into the Republic, I think, maybe. Feel free to add suggestions underneath and in the comments, or email me, or join Discord if you have ideas or suggestions. And then when we finish this book, maybe we can jump into Jesus and Socrates having a dialogue in heaven. And we will be like, hey, maybe that can be like the sixth dimension for us. Meeting Socrates and Jesus on the surface of the true earth, having a dialectic. And we will feel like we're with friends because we have been practicing the dialectic ourselves, as Socrates told us to do, in order to meet him where he's going. So that is exciting and on the horizon for us to hang out with Socrates and Jesus through that text, qualified to be there because we've practiced the art of the dialectic. And that's what we're going to be doing in our second reading, training up the art of the dialectic. And now we understand why. We're going from an understanding of what true learning is to an understanding of what true philosophy is, training up, practicing the art of the dialectic. We can throw that in here too. The art of the dialectic. Now, this is the practice of that. The dialectic will help our remembering. The dialectic we also have to apply here, and probably to go there too. So the dialectic is in all of them. That's why I didn't write it in this one specifically. But practicing up, training up the art of the dialectic is a good way of understanding the true nature of philosophy. And we've seen why we're doing it, what's the future for us, where are we going with this, why it's important to read it a second time, the consequences that follow for our soul, for our reincarnation, and for the next texts that we read. So a lot of motivation and exciting wonder and awesomeness. Cheer.
Wow.
And that's what we'll be jumping into next time. I'm promising to get into it a lot, but we've had to do a bit of reflection on why we're doing it and why it's important to do and what we'll get out of it. As Socrates said at the end of what we were reading, he said, by the way, practice this, enjoy this. This is your purpose. This is your preparation. You are being a true brave, and you'll be of good cheer if you do this and take pleasure in this love of learning. And if you do so, you will necessarily benefit, as though you were singing myths to yourselves, as though they were spiritual incantations, as though going through it again benefits you in a spiritual initiation or incantation way. Now we're seeing why, because this is the spiritual incantation, is the transition from philosophy to philophronesis, or going through our second reading, applying the dialectic, practicing it up to bringing that with us to the experience of nous as this spiritual initiation, incantation. Very exciting. Let's get started on. Hey, we might not have to wait till we get to the big boss. As we start, it might be sufficient. So there's a rule that says you can't have phronesis and nous at the beginning of the text. So long as you're in here, your allotted destiny or the divine self might call you up. So very exciting. And that's what we're going to be doing next time. Our second reading, to practice the dialectic, train ourselves up for as a repetition of a myth, as though we're singing as incantation to our soul. The incantation being this, the true spiritual experience and initiation. And also we're training up to defeat the big boss at the end of the text. Very exciting, very cool. And I hope that's a sufficient enough cliffhanger for you to be excited. And I hope that you'll join me next time. Thank you for joining. Again, like, subscribe on YouTube, follow along on Twitch, and ask questions in real time. Join the Discord, free text underneath. And if you want to support, there's a Patreon too. And I'd be very grateful if you do. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you next time.